120 countries said this weapon is so brutal it should never exist. 40% of these bombs don't explode when they hit the ground, they just wait. And right now, hundreds of them are raining down on neighborhoods where kids play outside. One single missile cracks open midair and spits out 80 smaller bombs with zero guidance whatsoever. In literally seconds, they scatter across an area the size of 100 football fields. But here's the thing that makes these weapons truly terrifying: most of them work exactly as designed. It's the ones that don't work that become the real nightmare. So let me break down exactly how this technology works, because once you get the engineering, everything else makes sense. Alright, so think about a regular bomb for a second. It hits one spot, creates one blast zone, done. Pretty effective. But if your targets are spread out across a kilometer, you'd need dozens of bombs to cover the area. Cluster munitions were basically invented to solve that exact problem. The concept is actually dead simple. One big parent bomb carries a bunch of smaller bombs packed inside it. Depending on the model, we're talking anywhere from 2 to over 600 mini bombs per missile. These bad boys can be dropped from planes, shot from artillery, or delivered by ballistic missiles flying at insane speeds. Now let me walk you through what actually happens from launch to impact. The parent missile flies toward its target zone on a standard ballistic path, nothing fancy yet. At a preset altitude, usually somewhere between 100 and 1,000 meters up, it splits wide open. A timer or altitude sensor triggers the shell to crack, and the bomblets come pouring out like deadly confetti. Some designs use small explosive charges to eject them, others just spin the shell crazy fast to fling them out. As they fall, they spread out in an oval pattern. Engineers call this the footprint. The higher the release and the faster the spin, the bigger that footprint gets. Okay, now let's zoom in on these bomblets themselves. This is where it gets absolutely wild. Take the BLU-97, one of the most common types out there. It's literally about the size of a soda can. This tiny little cylinder is engineered to destroy 3 completely different types of targets all at once. First up, there's a shaped charge at the front that can punch clean through 7 inches of tank armor. When it detonates, a copper cone collapses into a jet moving faster than sound straight through solid steel. Second, the steel casing is scored to shatter into roughly 300 metal fragments on impact. Those shards are lethal to anyone within range. We're talking a serious kill radius here. And third, there's a zirconium ring that ignites the moment it hits and starts fires everywhere. So yeah, one tiny bomb gives you armor penetration, fragmentation, and fire damage all in one package. To make sure they fall correctly, most bomblets have little parachutes or inflatable balloons attached. These slow them down and keep them nose first, which is absolutely critical for the fuse to actually work. Most use impact fuses, meaning they're designed to blow up the instant they hit something hard. The BLU-97 arms itself. During the fall, it needs to spin and feel at least 6 Gs of force to activate. That whole process takes about 2.6 seconds, and then it's live and ready to detonate on contact. But here's where everything goes sideways, and honestly, this is the whole reason these weapons are so controversial. This arming mechanism only works under very specific conditions. If the bomblet lands at a weird angle, the firing pin doesn't line up right and boom, no explosion. If it lands in soft ground like mud, sand, snow, or grass, there's not enough resistance to trigger it. Damaged parachutes, extreme temperatures, old stockpiles sitting in warehouses for years, all of these jack up the failure rate. Engineers have a term for this. They call it the dud rate. Basically, it's the percentage of bomblets that just straight up don't go off when they're supposed to. Now, manufacturers will swear up and down it's only 2 to 5% in controlled lab tests. But real combat conditions are never controlled. Actual dud rates in the field run anywhere from 10 to 40%. During the 2006 Lebanon War, some areas saw failure rates as high as 40%. Engineers tried to fix this whole mess by adding self-destruct mechanisms, basically a backup fuse that triggers if impact fails. The M85, for example, is supposed to self-destruct within 15 seconds if it doesn't hit anything hard. Sounds great in theory, right? But field data showed even that backup system fails about 10% of the time. So what does all this technical stuff have to do with what's actually happening in the world right now? Everything, because this exact technology is being fired at Israeli cities as we speak. Iran's Khorramshahr 4, also called K-Bar, is a medium-range ballistic missile with a 2,000-kilometer range. It carries a massive warhead weighing between 1,500 and 1,800 kilograms, one of the biggest in Iran's entire arsenal. According to Israeli military assessments, the cluster warhead opens at about 7 kilometers up. It releases around 20 submunitions, each one packed with about 2.5 kilograms of high explosives. Those 20 bomblets scatter across a diameter of roughly 16 kilometers from just one single missile. The missile itself travels at Mach 16 outside the atmosphere, and Mach 8 inside defenders have almost zero time to react. And this is precisely why cluster munitions create an absolute nightmare for missile defense systems. Systems like Arrow and Iron Dome are built to intercept single projectiles traveling on predictable paths. But the Khorramshahr 4 can actually maneuver during its final descent. It literally changes course on the way down. And even if you somehow manage to shoot down the main missile, it might have already released its payload. Now you've got 20 bomblets the size of hand grenades falling from 7 kilometers up. They're too small, too numerous, and spreading way too fast to intercept individually. It's basically impossible. According to the Israeli military, roughly half of all ballistic missiles Iran is firing right now carry cluster warheads. They're launching these things almost daily at major cities Tel Aviv, Beersheba, Rishon LeZion. Since this conflict kicked off in late February 2026, at least 14 Israeli civilians have been killed. More than 2,300 people have been injured, and those numbers keep climbing every single day. But let me tell you about 2 of those casualties, because cold numbers don't capture what this actually looks like on the ground. March 9th, 2 construction workers were at a job site in Yehud when the siren started blaring. They were exactly 15 steps from the bomb shelter, that's it. Just 15 steps away from safety. With a conventional missile, 15 steps might actually be enough time to make it inside. But cluster bomblets don't give you 15 steps, they give you absolutely nothing. Both men died before they could reach the shelter. And they're far from alone. Bomblets have been raining down on residential neighborhoods all across Israel. Holon, Bat Yam, or Yehuda. These aren't military bases, these are neighborhoods where regular families live. Places where kids ride bikes in the streets, where people walk their dogs after dinner. But here's the part that honestly keeps me up at night. The immediate deaths are really just part of the story. See, a regular bomb either explodes or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, it's one object you can locate and safely remove. But a single cluster strike releasing 600 bomblets with a 10% dud rate, that leaves 60 unexploded bombs scattered completely randomly across the landscape. Each one is tiny, often the size of a tennis ball, and could be buried in dirt or hidden in some random bush. Unlike landmines that are placed deliberately and can actually be mapped out, cluster duds fall with zero record of where they land. The Israeli military is now literally handing out flyers to civilians. You want to know what they say? Don't touch anything you find on the ground, it might be an unexploded bomb. Just imagine having to tell your kids that, hey, if you see something shiny in the backyard, don't pick it up, it could kill you. And if you think that sounds extreme, we've already seen exactly what happens when cluster duds pile up in a country over time. Between 1964 and 1973, approximately 270 million cluster bomblets were dropped on Laos. Let that sink in for a second. That's 90 bombs for every single person who was living there at the time. And roughly 80 million of those, about 1/3 of the total, completely failed to explode. More than 50 years after that war ended, about 50 people still die every single year from these old bombs. And here's what really gets me, 40% of those casualties are children. Because these bomblets are small, roughly the size of a tennis ball, and they're often brightly colored. Kids find them in fields while they're out playing and genuinely think they're toys. They pick them up, curious about what they found, and I really don't need to finish that sentence. Same exact story played out in Lebanon. 4.6 million bomblets dropped in 2006, about 1 million of them never detonated. Those duds ended up contaminating 26% of all the farmland in southern Lebanon. Farmers literally cannot work their own fields without risking their lives every single day. This is exactly why over 120 countries signed the Convention on Cluster Munitions back in 2008. But here's the catch, Iran never signed it, and neither did Israel, the US, Russia, or China. The 5 biggest military powers on the planet all decided they wanted to keep these weapons ready to go. And from a pure engineering standpoint, cluster munitions actually work exactly as they were designed to work. They efficiently spread explosive force across a massive area and take out dispersed targets with a single shot. The failure isn't in the design itself, it's in accepting that a 10% dud rate is somehow acceptable. When you're launching missiles carrying 20 bomblets each, even just 10% failure leaves thousands of unexploded devices behind. And here's the thing, those devices don't care about, they can't tell the difference between a soldier in 2026 and a child in 2076. Right now, somewhere in Israel, there are unexploded bomblets half buried in the ground, just waiting. They could go off tomorrow, or 50 years from now, or maybe a demining team gets lucky and finds them first. We've built weapons smart enough to scatter hundreds of bombs across kilometers with perfect timing. But somehow, we still can't guarantee they'll all actually do what they're supposed to do. Somewhere in Laos right now, there's a kid playing in a field who might find a bomb that's been sitting there since 1970. And somewhere in Israel, there's a bomb buried in the ground waiting for a kid who hasn't even been born yet. Same technology, same consequences separated by half a century. Every single cluster strike plants a future that engineers can calculate but will never be able to control.